ask, it requires a roll call vote, a motion to go into executive session. We will be coming back into open public session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Being none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call vote to go into executive session. Mary Rose Dickow?
Aye.
Under Article 9, negotiations, I believe. Is that the correct one, Joyce? Article 3, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. Article 3. Joseph Notaro?
Aye.
Tony Ferrantino?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Please ask you to clear the room, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Sorry for the inconvenience. Who passed away this past week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Review of the minutes, it's the pleasure of the board. I'm going to skip public comment because of all the people here. We'll put it at the end of the meeting tonight. Just
Also
because
move,
we-
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Next on the agenda is the presentation by State Rep Harold Naughton in the Wachusett Reservoir property.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Harold.
Thank you for having us here. As the board will remember, sometime earlier in the year, some concern was expressed in regard to a piece of correspondence. I think it was quite well done. And Mr. Shaughnessy, Kevin Shaughnessy, sent to the board about the cleanup of the PCBs that we learned about last year at the Wachusett Reservoir. And the board had requested, we were attending at that point anyways, to try to get some people in here from the Commonwealth and from the NWRA to explain the cleanup process and where it stands and where they're going from here. Keep the people in the town apprised. So we have a couple of people here. What I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, especially since we're limited on seats up here, I have got, we have had the honor of several different people coming here to talk to us. A couple representing the MWRA, National Water Resources Authority, which is in charge of the cleanup, and then John Scannell, the Regional Director of Watershed Management for the Commonwealth Department of Conservation and Recreation, to talk somewhat more about the aesthetics of the area and the road leading in. What I would suggest with your agreement and with these gentlemen's agreement is possibly the people representing the MWRA step up, start their presentation. They've brought some charts and pictures here and talk about the cleanup, and then at the appropriate point, Director Scannell can jump in and tell us about what's going on from the DCR point of view. So if I could ask Leon Littell from the Mass Water Resources Authority. Leon's the environmental manager of the Real Property and Environmental Division. Leon, if you could have a seat. And the private consultant that's been brought in by MWRA is Mike Conway of GZA Geo Environmental. And they're putting together the reports dealing with the EPA on behalf of the MWRA. Michael, if you'd like to step up, and I'll step back. And if you want to lead the presentation here? Okay, and I'll be right behind
If it's okay with you, I can stand over
Behind you.
here.
Absolutely, sir.
Flip the slides.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Leon Latai. I'm environmental manager with MWRA. And what we'd like to do is just give a brief summary of what has happened with the PCB contamination and its investigation and cleanup. As you know, we had first discovered this when other work to do spillway improvements at the dam was going on. There was some demolition that was coming up at one end of the dam, what's called the bastion chamber. And to do that work, we had to investigate some of the materials that were going to be removed, such as caulking. And in that process, we identified that there was PCBs in the caulking, and that led us to have to continue an investigation. And if you look at this particular board, it shows the walkway, and the top of the dam has got caulking and joints along the top that are about every 10 feet. So there's a good amount of it. And you can see that inset in the drawing shows the caulking in a joint in various stages of attachment and disattachment. So there has obviously been some weathering in those joints, and that was what we were faced with initially. Now, if you go to the second board, that represents the top of the dam. It shows the bastion chamber at the top of the board, which is where we first discovered the material. Once we started looking into the extent of contamination on the top of the dam, we realized that we'd have to consider whether or not this material would have migrated down the backside of the dam and gotten into the soil. And we first investigated that, got results in March of 2007. And that diagram shows the initial locations that were looked at for soil, which was right at the base of the dam. In that situation, we identified contaminants, PCBs in the soil at a level of, that was above 10 parts per million, which triggered a notification to the Mass DEP, which notification was done within 2 hours of identifying that information. That was on March 9th. And that also triggered more discussions with DEP to identify whether or not we needed to restrict access to that part of the site. And that led to the installation of a fence. And immediately after that action was decided on, we notified the town of Clinton, I think by mail and also verbally, that we were going to have to enter into this process of what's called an immediate response action, which included further investigation of soil as well as installation of a more permanent fence. So that was put into place. Why don't you go to the next slide? And just to give you a sense of the extent of what we've looked at out there, this shows the top of the dam, and the major points marked in red are the initial locations where we actually analyzed the caulk and found values ranging anywhere from 2,000 to approximately 7,000 parts per million in the caulk. Beyond looking at the caulk, we also had to investigate the concrete itself that the caulk was inserted into, because PCBs tend to migrate into the adjacent surfaces from the caulk itself. And we did identify concentrations of PCBs in the concrete. They didn't migrate very far into the concrete, but it was sufficient so we identified that we'd have to be doing removal of concrete as well as caulk when we got to the actual process of remediation. And in addition, if you look at the base of the dam, which is at the top of the drawing, you can see some lines, green lines, which show three levels of investigation for the soil at the bottom of the dam. We took samples pretty much along the base of the dam, right at the edge of the dam, about 4 feet out and about 8 feet out. And that's mostly the extent of what we found for soil contamination. And the total number of samples that I've listed on there, I believe is, can you read that, Mike? I think it's 180, roughly. In the left-hand corner, I've got the... Oh, it's not a total number? Oh, okay. Yeah, there's, what I was trying to show there is that of all the samples we took, which is roughly around 150 samples, or maybe 180, we have about 115 of those were less than 1 part per million, which is the cleanup level that's required by EPA. There was a number, Mike, can you put that back up, please, just a sec? And then on the second level, I can't read it. Can you read the second level? Between 1 and 10 parts per million, I think it says 115 samples. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can read it.
This?
Yeah.
What's?
Yeah. From 1 to about 10 part per million, we had.
Samples less than 1
Yeah,
part per million. 51 samples
From
between
1
1
and
and
10.
10 parts per million, and 21 samples more than 10 up to 280.
Right, and that was, so there was a small number of samples that were in the 10 to 280 part per million level. They were mostly located up on the east side of the upstream side of the dam. And that's the general extent of, where we have identified soil contamination. It does wrap around on the east side, it does wrap around a little bit towards the other side of the abutment that you can see on the right side there. But those are relatively low concentrations. And again, it's all very much confined to the general area of the dam structure itself, which is in keeping with the way we believe that material was sloughed off from the top of the dam with rainwater and wind blowing it down to the base. Now, in addition to collecting the samples of caulk and the concrete and the soil, we also looked at the upstream and downstream sides of the dam, the actual faces. If you look at the dam, you always notice that it's got the white sections, and that's like what's called efflorescence, which is a buildup of minerals. And that we've tested that and the bare surfaces of the dam as well, and found that we have some level of PCBs in that material, which again is probably trapped from migration from the top of the dam. And on that back side of the dam, those numbers range anywhere from, I think the highest is 25 parts per million, down to much lower levels. Most of it is more like 1 part per million or less. But that's also another area that we'll have to be looking at for remediation. Go to the next slide, Mike. Now, the other investigation that we undertook, this was back in April, was to make sure that the water in the reservoir was not picking up any of this contamination. So, an extensive program of sampling took place, and you can see the locations that are identified by the white dots. The samples were taken at multiple levels, both at the surface and in some cases 7 meters down to about 30 meters in depth. And we also took samples at the intake, at Cosgrove intake, at the fountain below the dam, at the Clinton intake for your water treatment, and also a sample adjacent to the Clinton intake in the reservoir itself. And all these samples were analyzed and found to have no detectable PCBs. So that was one of the things we wanted to establish early on in this process. Now, as we were gathering this information, we were in communication with both DEP initially for the notification that was required by their regulations, and also with EPA, because the PCB levels that were found at the site trigger the Toxic Substances and Control Act regulations, which bring EPA into the process for reviewing and also following their regulations regarding any cleanup of PCBs. It's a requirement if PCBs are greater than 50 parts per million that a cleanup process be undertaken. And so from the start of this investigation, EPA and DEP have visited the site to both understand the scope of the issue, and since then we've been coordinating with them in terms of providing, they've been providing guidance to us, as well as we've been sending them the results of all these tests, working with them on plans for remediation. And if you go to the next board, Mike. The process that we've had to go through for remediation has been one of providing EPA with a general plan of attack, which was based on understanding what level of effort would have to be undertaken to do the remediation. We had to do pilot studies on what cleanup methods would work, as well as just direct investigation of the extent of the contamination. And to date, where we stand now is that we've gotten approval for cleanup at the Cosgrove intake because there are PCBs and caulking at the Cosgrove intake building itself as well. And for the dam top, which means the caulking on top of the dam and removal of the concrete on top of the dam. The conceptual plans for those was approved by EPA, and from that, we put together plans and specs, bid them out for contractors to be on board to do the work. And where we stand right now is for both Cosgrove and the top of the dam, the work plans are being prepared and reviewed by us and by EPA to be able to get final approval to institute the work. And at this point, the notice to proceed for the Cosgrove intake work was issued, and that was issued back in October. We expect that the remediation will be starting in April, which is right around the corner, and the completion date would be in October, and that's for Cosgrove intake. Now, Mike, if you could just go to the next slide for just a minute and then bring it back to this one, just to give you a sense of Cosgrove. That's the intake building, and what we discovered there was caulking along the walkway, which circles the building right next to the water level. There's fairly high concentrations of PCBs in the caulking in that area, and around, and actually in the granite facing in the building itself, there's much lower levels, but there's caulking there as well. And that will all be removed as part of the process for remediation. But to go back to the dam, if you could put that one back up, Mike. On the top of the dam, we have a notice to proceed for the contractor in November. And again, they're ready, they should be ready to start in April as well. Again, the work plans are in final review stage right now. And that's with Zoppo Corporation with TMC as a subcontractor. And again, they're going to be removing the caulk from the top of the dam. They'll be removing the top slab of concrete at the top of the dam. And there was a decision that had to be made about whether we remove the whole slabs of concrete or just the areas that were immediately contaminated. But from a practical standpoint, it's just as it works just as well to remove all of it. And then they're also going to be removing about a ½ inch of the subslab below that, which also in some areas has some contamination. That will be removed, and which is about another ½ inch of material. And this is all going to be done within a containment structure that's going to be basically placed on top of the dam and moved along the top. And if, Mike, if you'd like to say a few things about how that's going to be working.
Yeah, good. Folks are interested. The one you used was called a strong structure. It's sort of like a large version of what you might sometimes see as a car shelter. Outside it's going to be installed on a rail system and sealed to the dam under negative pressure, similar to the requirements that will be imposed on an asbestos abatement job. This isn't an asbestos abatement job, but the same technology for negative pressure is utilized to ensure that any caulk or PCB material that's potentially liberated as dust during the removal process can't escape from the structure. It will be contained, put into containers, and then cleaned, and then they'll be removed and put in dumpsters and removed from the site. And then this containment structure, once they finish a section, a 40-foot long section of the dam, they'll roll it or slide it along. After that area is completely cleaned, it's been tested and verified, they'll roll it along and do the next 40 feet and so on. So it'll be an iterative process that'll move along until the dam is completely PCB-free at the top of the dam. And then they'll restore that top slab, and that part of the project will be done. So it's a very labor-intensive and containment-intensive process.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And again, that contract completion date is November 12th for this year.
So we gonna go on to the other parts of the project now? Yeah.
Yes.
So with the top, how much material will be taken off the top? Tonnage, is it?
Oh, actually, I don't have the actual tonnage.
Is that what you're inquiring about,
The tonnage of concrete?
volume of material?
Yeah.
Well, it's a 5-inch thick slab, plus another, say, inch
Yeah,
for the sub-slab. So 6 inches times 20 feet wide times 850 feet long. You could, quickly convert that to cubic feet and then yards, and I would use about 2 tons per yard. So if you convert that to cubic feet, I don't have the calculator on me, but it's, then once you get cubic feet divided by 27, obviously, for cubic yards, and then times 2 for tons. It's just sort of rule of thumb. They'll give you an idea of the total tonnage being removed. If you want to convert that to number of trucks or roll-offs, the roll-offs hold about 30 yards, but they may be weight limited in this case to 20 tons for roll-off.
And how do you propose taking that stuff out of there with the road washed out?
It's not coming out. It's coming out the top of the dam off onto Route 70.
Okay.
yeah, there'd be they'd stage a roll-off container in that area, just, the little offset at the top.
Walkway between the
Oh,
bottom and
still,
Route
yeah.
70.
Yeah, and they expect that they'd be filling one of those up at a time and then moving on to another one, so they would be probably no more than a couple of roll-offs in that area.
And is there any potential compromise to the environment with this overall remediation?
Well, that was the whole concern, and that's part of the reason it's taken this long to prepare the work plans, to completely understand where it is and isn't, to submit the work plans to EPA, get their approval on them, then develop the plans and specs, and then have the contractors who win the job actually write their own work plans, mimicking the ones that we've already got approved. So they're demonstrating to EPA, to us and to EPA, that they understand the sensitivity and the requirements, the containment issues and everything else. And that's part of the reason that, we were here about a year ago, and we're still here, and we don't have any physical removal work started yet. And part of the reason for that is because we've taken all these things into account. So can I tell you that there is zero possibility? No. We've done everything we possibly can with redundant systems and checks and balances and containment to ensure that there's no potential additional release during the remediation process.
And again, is one of the concepts we're using for this process too, is that we're starting with the top of the dam, which is the source, the actual caulking material and the concrete. That's being removed first, and that was done consciously so that if anything happened or anything was released during that process, even though we're doing our best to avoid that it would not impact on the area below, which is the face of the dam and the soil at the bottom. And so that's why that's the last step, and that's under preparation at this time. I guess our best estimate for a schedule right now is to have a notice to proceed by November of this year, based on the work we're doing now, starting work on that aspect of the project in April of next year and complete by November of next year. And again, that work is ongoing now. We're going to be having to go to EPA for approval of our concept, and then go through the same process of procuring a contractor. And again, that is going to be to remove the deposits on the face of the dam, to remove soil, and that's roughly going to be something on the order of about 2 feet of soil, possibly right at the base of the dam. And as we move out to about 4 to 8 feet, that'll maybe about 1 foot of soil that would be removed. That would be all loaded into roll-off containers and sealed properly, and then removed from the site. I think we're estimating roughly around a dozen roll-off containers that, given the current estimates of the amount of soil that needs to be removed. And again, the cleanup level that's required by EPA under the TSCA regulations is a 1 part per million standard, which is actually lower than DEP's requirement of 2 parts per million for unrestricted use of soil. So it's a pretty conservative level that we're remediating to. It'll be completely unrestricted at the bottom of the dam for any uses. So that is the status of the project at this point.
So that soil remediation can't proceed until you fix the roadway down below, is that correct?
Yeah, at this point, that would be the required piece, yeah.
And is this remediation fully funded by the state yet?
Well, this remediation work that I'm describing there is basically in our, is being planned for our CIP budget, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
John Scannell, I'm the regional director for DCR. Step back a project which led to all of this. As you may remember, the original project out there was the rehabilitation of the spillway in order to accommodate new federal dam requirements. That project is underway. The old spillway has been dismantled. The new automated gate is in place, although not all the controls are complete at this point. The second part of that project was an enhancement of the north dike between the Clinton and Leominster pump stations. Some of that work has occurred, and the remainder of that work will occur this spring and summer, and the intent is for that project to wrap up later summer or early fall. In the midst of all of that, in November of 2006, we had those heavy rains that caused a portion of the lower road to sink. One half of the road dropped about a foot. We did some investigations and hired a consultant to come in and start looking at that. They recommended that we pull the pavement off that part of the road and block access to that part of the road. We were able to secure some funding to have some design and repair work done for that. That was ongoing into the spring of last year, and that's when the April rains of 2007 took a much larger part of that roadway and washed it into the pond. We have gone back to the design engineers, and they are working on, and have been working on, some revised designs. They are now, based on the rains of the last several months, they have gone back to some much more significant field work, and we are concerned that there's a much greater part of that road that needs shoring up than what was originally intended. Originally was 150 feet of reconstruction of the road and then a replacement of the drainage system in that road. We think the fact that the drainage system is original in combination with groundwater and the flows that come out of the drainage system down the hill from Route 70 had led to the original problems. The design engineers, Ty and Bond, are now much more concerned that the amount of groundwater piping out of that hill is leading to a greater extent of road that needs to be looked at for rehabilitation, which will involve some type of wall or slope stabilization on the pond side, and then a new drainage system within that road. Recently, they were out there, so that's expanded the project drastically, which they're back at the drawing board. Recently, they were out there doing some more field work and have some concerns that they raised to us actually yesterday, that we should try to do some more immediate stabilization work to the area that has failed. And we are frantically seeking an emergency declaration to end around contracting process in order to put some stabilization onto that part of the road that's caved in within the next several weeks. Our hope is that they will complete design. The original intent was that the project would be designed, even the bigger project would be designed and completed by the end of the fiscal year in June, and that construction could move forward in the next fiscal year. Because the project has grown in size, the permitting requirements for the project, we believe will draw that out well into the summer and fall in order to secure Army Corps permits and state permits as well, which potentially will push off that final phase of the PCB work, and Leon only heard that as I met up with him tonight. Obviously, we need to get that road back in place before that final phase of the PCB work can occur. At this point, it's in a fairly significant amount of limbo because it seems to be changing rapidly, almost daily, design-wise, what their concerns are regarding the stabilization of that hill. So we are moving forward and hoping to get some emergency stabilization in there within the next several weeks and move forward on that design and permitting to repair the road.
So originally the road was 150 feet of it now? What estimate on?
Where it's washed, now they're potentially 700 to 800 feet of downhill stabilization is going to be required in either the form of, and they're providing us different design options, some type of retaining wall or reinforced boulder slope or something like that. Started with mostly centered around that area that's washed, and now they have greater concerns about a much longer length of the road.
What is the concern about going on maybe Grove Street if you need to complete the other project? Why are we delaying?
We really don't think that Grove Street is a feasible alternative for access for large trucks. And then the second, both the public way, and then the second concern would be whether or not, and we've not looked at it, whether or not the bridge that crosses the spillway would handle the weight of large trucks.
I think we need to look at that so we don't delay the project if it's at all possible.
That roadway can't wait any longer. I don't know if you've looked at it
No,
yourself, but.
I want to move forward with the roadway also, but I'm saying delaying the project on the dam face another year.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm surprised to hear coming from that table that you wouldn't be bothered by large trucks on Grove Street. In looking at it, it seems, and we're gonna ask our consultants to look at it from a feasibility perspective.
I don't know if there'd be, there's different sized trucks that you can bring out with roll-off, so we don't maybe have to go with the biggest truck and a couple more loads, but I'm sure a couple of days out to move along the project might be acceptable.
I just think the weight limit of your trucks and the width of your trucks, as you know, it's a tight street down there in our neighborhood, and I'd be more concerned with the Greyhound Bridge being able to handle.
And
Your trucks barely.
those are our initial concerns as well.
Your DCR trucks barely make it through there now. That big white one that comes down on a daily basis, they barely make it down there now.
Right. Obviously, this, up until the last week or so, we fully expected, that this was going to move along well, and that's not true anymore. So
Things happen.
we're early in the process of trying to figure out, and believe me, people are none too happy when they heard this week that it could put off the last phase of that remediation. But we're, at least our initial concerns is that roadway and that bridge are not appropriate for the remediation. But we've not had the ability, again, Leon's hearing this for the first time just before we come in. So it's pretty fresh.
So is the runoff from Route 70 still coming down?
The drainage system discharges. It comes partway down the hill and discharges in a pipe, runs further down to a head wall, which then collects and it discharges down by the elevation of the pond.
Is that still causing erosion, more erosion?
It just adds to the amount of water that's on that hill, and really what's happening under the road is it becomes liquefied, really.
Plastic barriers.
I was going to ask you about the current work that's going on the new spillway, and so are there any issues with that? I mean, is that everything's fine and?
It has been delayed. There were some difficulties early in the project with the actual new automated gate, the steel gate that's up there. That happened in January. It was supposed to happen back in October. So that delayed that being fully functional. But the project itself was intended, to go up through this summer anyway. So even all of the rest of the work on the dike and around there would have continued in the spring. But basically, they ended up doing in the dead of winter what they had intended to complete at the end of last fall and kind of be shut down for the winter. So I think from the contractor's perspective, it was detrimental, but from the timeline of the whole project, I don't think it's...
Are we back on the timeline, or are we still behind a little bit?
Pieces of it are behind, but they've indicated it's not put off, their end date on the project because it's kind of different subs working on it. Again, they expected the gate would be fully automated by this point, and they're behind on that.
So what's the end date for that project?
Late summer.
Late summer.
Any other questions, this board? Unless you have anything more to add, Mr. Scannell, we appreciate you
The
coming
only thing
in.
I would highlight for people, which maybe we need to put a sign up there, just we hear a fair amount about, is the fencing that was put up because of the PCBs are, just so you're aware, it was a shorter fence and closer in initially, and DEP and EPA required it to be a bigger fence and move it further out, and we realized that that's detrimental, especially those people who run the stairs. But it was what was required. We've had comments about, well, why aren't you going in there to cut the grass? We realized that it looks horrible at the top of the dam. We have no control over that. It's a restricted area. No one's allowed inside for other than purposes of a remediation project.
Sure.
And
It's fully understandable.
we hear it publicly, and just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that. It's, believe me, not by choice.
No? Okay.
I want to point out, just, Mr. Chairman, the new, Richard Sullivan, right? The new Commissioner?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan, the new, relatively new Commissioner of Conservation and Recreation, former mayor of the city of Westfield, has indicated that the upkeep of our state facilities, meaning the aesthetics, is high on his list. For years, because of our budget constraints, many, not just the Wachusett Reservoir Reservation, but Wachusett Mountain, Douglas State Forest, various state facilities have not had the resources to keep them up to the pristine nature that we've always been used to, especially in this area. And Commissioner Sullivan has committed to members of the Environmental Caucus, of which I'm a member in the legislature, to seek other forms of funding, other types of revenue, federal revenue, potential private partnerships to bring our state facilities, our state forests and parks back up to what we expect. And I'm fully confident that when it gets done, and obviously we've been informed of the delays tonight, that our own Wachusett Reservation will get back up to the great scenic beauty that we're used to, and that John has been so good with his crew over the years of keeping up. I want to thank John and Mike and Leon for coming out tonight. They're very cognizant and work well with my office of the historic significance of the Wachusett Reservoir in our town. We're talking about 40% of the town was taken for the building of that reservoir. Many of our ancestors came here from other countries to help with the building of it, and how it's kind of a living, breathing entity to us here in Clinton. And they're very cognizant of that, and they realize how special it is to us and how we've always considered it a sacred trust. So I want to thank them for being here tonight, and thanks for keeping up the communication. I'm sure they'd be back anytime we would need them and the board would request them. So thank you, John.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very much.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to thank Representative Norton and his staff for getting the necessary agencies, excuse me, here this evening to update the community on what's going on, and I thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Now, am I still with you for a few more minutes to give you a budget presentation?
Sure, if you'd like to, real quick.
We'll try to be quick. I know I don't want to hold up the school department. We'll have,
Are you going to be long, Harold?
I can be as long or short as the board wants me to be.
Too sweet.
Very, very quick. Everybody knows, or who has not officially met, my new chief of staff, Susan Templeton.
Absolutely.
She's taken over from Dan DiTullio.
who did a wonderful job for us for 6 years, and everybody in this town and this district should be very thankful to Dan, and he's moved on to private industry. What I will do then, if Susan will hand these budget proposals out to the committee, in just about a month's time, the House will be debating our version of the fiscal year '09 budget document. It takes some great ideas that Governor Deval Patrick's had and combines them with some other ideas that the House has had for funding the state needs and expectations of the coming fiscal year. That being said, we know we're in tough times. We're in tough financial times. We're in tough energy times with the cost of fuel, and we're in tough, the housing market is weighing us all down. And so that's affected everyone, including the Commonwealth and revenues coming into the Commonwealth. What I've laid out before you is the basics of the House plan. We conducted 10 hearings across the state, the House Ways and Means Committee, upon which I sit. I chaired the hearing in Auburn on economic development to see where the Commonwealth should go over the next year. You have the budget figures in front of you. We took a vote on, to give them this, well, they have it anyways, okay. You were given the, previously, the Chapter 70 and the lottery proposed disbursements by the House and the Senate. We took a local aid resolution a week and a half ago to tell the towns exactly what they can expect. And lottery, we are pledging to provide the same figure as last year, holding the towns harmless. That is requiring us to go somewhat into the stabilization fund, but at $2 3/4 million to the town of Clinton. And in your local aid, Chapter 70 school aid, $11,212,718, a rise of about $750,000, a little over $750,000 from last year. So, which I would believe, between the two of them, represent a significant portion of the budget of the town of Clinton. Getting there is not easy. And in the interest of brevity, because I know we have a very full agenda tonight, I'll just run through a few of the proposals of the House in closing what everyone knows is a significant $1.3 billion budget gap. We will propose $100 million in budget cuts to state agencies and state programs, hopefully most of which we find are duplicative and redundant. Other savings and reforms within the state agencies, about $253 million, providing some beefed up powers to the Department of Revenue and other state revenue collection agencies, which should bring in another $166 million. Corporate tax reforms, of which I won't go into now, but we do have a presentation which we will provide to the board, which we think, and along with the governor, could bring in an extra $200 million per year, capping some of the ability of these corporations to maybe have a majority of their operations in the Commonwealth, but declare their headquarters elsewhere, or vice versa. We'll finally bring them to the table. And we'll send you further documentation of that, and if you want me to come in and talk about it more before we get into the budget. Cigarette tax. Surprisingly, a lot of people still smoke. I saw a guy pay $6 a pack for a pack of cigarettes today when I was getting gas. And so it's still out there. We feel raising that by $1 would raise $152 million in the coming fiscal year. And maybe that'll drop afterwards, maybe it'll force people to stop smoking eventually, but that turns around and saves us money in the mass health funds because of chronic smokers. We are unfortunately having to dip into the stabilization fund to the extent of $229 million. That is not as much as some people wanted us to do. The minority leader wanted us to take $450 million out of the stabilization fund to increase the amount in make-up, in addition to the lottery funds that we give to the town. I, as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, feel that is unwise because all the so-called smart people, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, Mass Taxpayers Foundation, all of these economists are telling us this is not going to be the only year that we're going to be facing this budget cap. So we feel it's prudent to leave a significant portion in the stabilization fund for the coming year, for fiscal year 10. And we are also going to not
transfer into the stabilization fund $107 million that we had intended, and we're going to take $91 million in stabilization fund interest that would be paid by the banks where we keep them into the fund. We're going to put that into the general fund. That is the House's proposal in brief, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, on how we are going to make up that $1.3 million, $1.3 billion gap to fund our state programs, assistance for our state colleges and universities, and most importantly, though, to hold the towns harmless on their lottery aid and give the increase, which for the town of Clinton is well over a 4% increase in funds from the Commonwealth for last year. So I am open for any questions. I realize you have a very tight agenda, but I'm happy to come back at some future meeting. We're open for questions tonight.
Yeah, if I just have one question.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you have the answer, but how much was education increased by this year? Do you remember?
Overall, 4.43%, about $280 million overall, statewide. And Clinton fits right as that average, maybe even a little bit higher.
Higher.
Sure.
On the, there, any consideration about the gas tax in lieu of having the tolls increase?
Increasing the gas tax?
Yeah.
I would talk about it. I mean, I think, I have issues with representing Metro West communities. I have issues with this toll staying in place anyways, but
Right.
By the same token, I think during debate, Tony, you will see some amendments put forward towards that, but the people are already struggling as it is with $3.10, $3.15. When I saw one place in Boston last week, it was
I understand, but doesn't,
regular.
that toll revenue goes to the Mass Turnpike and, you know, that whole infrastructure and
Oh, I
people
agree.
and...
But the same token, they're an quasi-independent agency who the governor and legislative leadership would have to take some action to basically do away with them. And I don't know if there's the political will at that level right now. I think you'd find a lot of rank and file members that would be there. You know, I think what you may see is more of an intent to maybe try and tap those funds for other capital projects, as opposed to pick up more of the tab for, say, the bills that are going to be left over for all these holes in the big dig.
Yeah, I mean, if they could phase in a cashless toll system, it would really be a benefit to everyone in Massachusetts.
No, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
For all of us who travel that road on a daily basis, it's...
And the other, just one final thing, you know, the lottery, revenues to the lottery were always going to be returned to the towns, cities and towns. So, I mean, I really would like to see that restored. I mean,
Absolutely.
the idea of it being skimmed and saved in other funds is not what the intention of the lottery was.
Well,
But,
I agree with your overall concept. Whether or not I agree with what the original intent was, I haven't been around that long. I wasn't quite there when it was put into place, but I tend to agree with you, and I think that's also one of the regrettable results of the defeat of the casino bill last week, which I voted in favor of. What we're left with now is at least one Indian casino coming into the Commonwealth, which we'll get nothing out of potentially, and but all the attendant problems. What colleagues of mine and I had prepared for amendments on the floor were one that would commit all or a great majority of the revenue coming in from any casinos to the cities and towns. But we didn't get to that. But we'll hopefully be back next year with a revised plan on that. But no, but you're right. That's where it should go. Absolutely.
thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Not a question, just a comment. I didn't know how you voted on that issue, Harold, but I have to commend you. I think that was the correct vote. I think when Massachusetts people spend over $1 billion in 2 different states, and we're talking about taking money out of the stabilization fund to balance a budget, I think that's poor planning. And whether it's protecting the sacred lottery, And, you know, letting people go out of state to spend their money is absolutely ludicrous. So I commend you on that, because I know there weren't that many that took that position, and that took a lot of courage, because I know the leadership was against it. So I think you should be commended for that, because I think that was the right vote to take.
I appreciate that. We'll see what the future brings as a result of that, but no, you have to stand up for your convictions. Thank you, Mary.
Nothing
Thank you,
else,
Harold.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time, Harold. Appreciate all you do for us.
That was courageous.
School department.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. God. Nice to see you.
Nice to be seen. Tonight I have a little PowerPoint presentation for you. And the flavor of the PowerPoint will begin with such that I want to give you a feeling about the school system, a good feeling about the school system, and some of the good things that are happening within that school system. From there, I'll take you into some of the monies from the state, how they justify what they're going to give us. I'll give you a little history of the budget over the last 4 or 5 years. I'll show you our budget, and I'll entertain any questions at any time that you feel that, just stop me, and we'll go from there. This is the exact same budget presentation as I gave the school committee and the finance committee, so I haven't changed the numbers. I haven't added or deducted anything, so it's all the same. First, I want to start the PowerPoint by just explaining what I mean by an excellent system. And these are some of the caveats that go along with this. First of all, we have a full-day kindergarten in Clinton. A lot of communities, if you look in the paper, are fighting with school committees in towns to get a full-day kindergarten because they can't afford it. Some are even offering kindergarten half-day for $2,000 or $3,000. Here, we've made the commitment to go full-day, and we did that for a reason. We did it because we wanted to give our kids the best possible jump they could get going into their first year of school, that's grade 1. Our dropout rate at Clinton High School is less than 3%. I think if you take a look, the state's probably running around 5%. That's high for us, by the way. Usually we're down around 2%. The attendance at our Clinton Public Schools is an excellent 95%. We bought new math books for K-3. I put that in there because I want to show you how important we feel the curriculum, and that we are spending money to upgrade our curriculum, especially at the elementary school. Over 95% of our teachers at the Clinton Elementary School have been trained in what we call responsive classroom. It's a program that was designed for teachers to learn to work with students. So it takes place in the beginning of the day and throughout the day, and it creates a bond between the kids and the teachers. And it's working very well. It reduces disciplinary action, and it creates a better atmosphere for learning. We have a new student management system called iPass, which we're able to track our students. The state is now requiring every one of our teachers to be tracked. We have to be able to provide for them what degrees they have, what classes they teach, are they certified to teach those classes, are they highly qualified. 100% of the class of 2007 passed MCAS for the state of Massachusetts. That's huge. Now, they didn't probably, some of them didn't make the requirements at Clinton High School, but they were eligible through the state of Massachusetts. Math MCAS scores in grade 10 is where we kind of measure our students when they leave our system. That's the last year they test an MCAS. We have moved from 2% to 45% in the advanced category over 9 years. The state says a movement of 3% is monumental. Math MCAS scores grade 10 decreased from a failing rate of 55% to 1% over the 9-year period. MCAS scores also qualified 32 seniors for free tuition at any state college or university. That gave parents quite an edge for their child to be able to attend a university where some students probably couldn't afford it, probably might have opted out to work for a year. This is a great opportunity if they work hard in school and score in a proficient and advanced category in MCAS, or in the 25% of their class are offered this. Grade 10 MCAS biology, we got scores for the first time last year. We're 46% higher than the state average in proficient and advanced. The top two categories where the state says you must by the year 2014 score. Again, new ELA series in K through 8. This is our second year. We're hoping to see some great results, especially on our MCAS scores. Our elementary school has not made adequate yearly progress for 5 years. We feel like this tool and the training that we've given them should bring us to that level. 92% of our seniors will go on to college. Over 110 students from other districts attend Clinton Public Schools. That's a strong statement from the communities around us that they want to come here to get educated.
Jerry, just a quick question on that. 92% of the seniors that go on to college, what's the average around the state?
I'm going to, I'm throwing a guess out here. I'm going to say probably mid-80s. We have a ConnectEd phone system for emergency attendance notification. It's funded by the PTA. I threw that in there because that's an integral part. If you've been called by me on a snow day, you parents that are up there, it's a 5:30 call, but it also enables us to be able to call for emergencies, if there's a disaster, to notify you if we have to get out of school early. And I put down funded by the PTA because I want you to understand that this budget is not just money from the state and municipality. It's also people like the PTA that help support us. We have grants that total $1 million that we use for salaries. We also use $400,000 of the school choice money that you see for students that come in to supplant this budget for salaries. So when we ask you for money here and what the DOE gives you, it's much larger and more complex than you could imagine. We don't have user fees for transportation, parking, kindergarten, and library. We feel that it's a free and public education. If for me to charge for transportation, if one child cannot get a ride to school and has to walk on a snowy day and gets hit by a car, it's not worth the $40,000 or $50,000 you may generate to do so. We offer VHS courses at Clinton Middle School and Clinton High School. A VHS course is a long-distance learning course, and it gives us the option to be able to give your children, the children in Clinton, the opportunity to take courses like German, programming, constitutional law, things that we could not offer in the system because we couldn't fill the classes up. We don't have the luxury, so they can take these courses online. It's for the motivated student. It's for a student that really is aggressive. So even students at the middle school have taken these courses, which are high school courses. Some of them are even college courses. Very attractive for some kids that even come in from other communities. CHS is fully accredited. We had 4 perfect scores in math MCAS at the middle school. Pre-K to kindergarten is NIAC accredited. ELA in grade 10 MCAS increased in the advanced proficient from 35% to 81% over 9 years. 2007 grade 5 MCAS increased 25% in advanced and proficient. Keeping in mind the number I gave you, 3% according to the state is significant. 2007 grade 7 MCAS increased 11% in the advanced category. SAT scores increased 30 points in ELA, 22 points in math. SAT, as you know, is given in the junior and senior year, which some colleges acknowledge as their tool to get in. A lot of colleges are leaving this saying we don't really need your scores. You can send in your transcripts. You have a choice either way. Why do we have an excellent system? Because I believe we do have excellent staff. We definitely have excellent facilities. If you take a look at what the townspeople have done, we've remodeled the middle school, built a new high school, magnificent fields, a new elementary school, and we've built all of those things for less than the treatment plant on 110. And of course, we couldn't do it without excellent children. Foundation budget. The foundation budget is a minimum requirement to educate students, and it's adjusted yearly for inflation, enrollment, pupil, and programs, and there's a wage adjustment factor which really doesn't apply to Clinton. And it's made up of local contribution and state aid, and that's Chapter 70 money which comes from the state, and the municipality contribution is what the state says you need to give to make it a minimum requirement for our education. And that equals our net school spending. This is directly from the DOE, and this is exactly what you're going to see that the state is going to say what you're going to get. And if you look right here, you're looking at FY08 and the increase for FY09, and it actually is a 7.25%. So the DOE has recommended that the town of Clinton receive $11,212,718 for aid, state aid through Chapter 70. They're also saying that that is going to be approximately 58% of your budget. They're recommending that the town's contribution is a little over $8 million. But keeping in mind, the state has increased their aid to us at 7.25. This is the Chapter 70 Foundation budget preliminary, and it kind of takes how they come up with the money, and it goes by categories, and it's actually a course in itself if you want to learn how to do this, but it actually breaks down how much money you get for each child. You get more money if it's an ELA child, ELL, special needs child, low income. You get more state aid for us, and it comes out to, as you look on the bottom, the foundation budget per pupil is around $9,432. Our proposed budget. In the salary account, we are proposing a 7.39% increase, which is a difference of $714,000 roughly. School pensions, which is an increase of less than 1%. Special education, which is an increase of $385,575, which is an 8.57% increase. Vocational education is actually only increased $8,229, and the reason is that the tuition at Assabet has actually gone down, which gives us a nice cushion. We have we will have next year 110 students at Assabet. Miscellaneous account is up 10.28%. It may look high, but I think if you take a look as we get further into this, the figures a little further, that you're going to see that year after year we've been asked to cut. And one of the places that we've cut has been miscellaneous, which means that we've cut back on teacher supplies year after year, and it's kind of compounded the issue. Again, you have heat, electricity, so forth and so on, which is kind of, we're trying to catch up. We're in a catch-up game presently. Athletic fund, we've level funded it. Of course, you know we have athletic fees. We feel we can make it. We have a before and after school program of $45,000. My thought to you is this: I can eliminate, or I should be able to eliminate that $45,000, and I'll tell you why. I am asking the town for $45,000, which almost looks like it's coming out of our Chapter 70 fund, or out of your revenues, which you give us to meet our minimum state or local requirement. Actually, what's happening is we charge for preschool. I mean, for the before school and after school. The money goes into a revolving account, and then we ask you for it. What I'm asking the selectmen, and we've written a letter to you, is to remove that money that we send to the general fund and let us have a revolving account in the school department. Take the $45,000 off of this budget, which shouldn't be there anyways, which cuts my budget down to 7% increase. You should have a sheet in front of you, but I'm sure you're not well versed in it yet, but do you have any questions on what I'm saying? Okay, total budget. We're asking for $19,235,964, which is a 7.34% increase. Again, if the $45,000 goes away, which shouldn't be there, it would be a just a little over 7% increase. This is a little snapshot from 2004 to 2009, and it kind of gives you the breakdown as we go across each year in each category. What I would try to do is call your attention down to the bottom, and it says the average percent of change in 6 years, and as you can see, it's 4.19%. As you know, if you've looked at the school department budget, 4.19% won't even keep up with the salary account and contractual obligations that we have. Never mind miscellaneous heat, electricity, gas, fuel. The change over a 5-year period before that, not counting this year, would have been a little under 4%. Again, another snapshot, it's a little different. I'll call your attention to this line because this is the line that kind of got my eye. This is the actual town contribution given with Chapter 70 money. It makes up our school department budget. And as you go across, you can see the increase that the town has given. In 2006, it was almost a 10% increase. But if you look at the next year, it's a minus 2.7%, and then you go to a 4.42%. When those things happen and you have a blip like that, it's catch-up time again, because you've made reductions, you've lost staff, you've held back on miscellaneous, you've low-balled fuel and heat, and you're trying to play catch-up, and it makes the budget that much harder and that much larger. Again, the percent of change on the bottom, you've given me 5% for the last 3 years. I'm asking again for 734. With the 45,000 gone, it's actually 7%. Fuel, gas, and electricity, just a little quick blurb. Last year, in the year 2007, we were in the red for $67,194. Why? Because I did not budget enough for that. It's a hit or miss game. Making reductions, I lowballed that figure in order to keep teachers and staff for the children. There's a little graph that's going to explain to you the allocated is green, and the red is actually what was expended. And as you can see, fuel, gas, and electricity is far above what was allocated for the last 4 years. This year, presently, we've allocated $781,000. We're projected $746,000. We feel like we should be in the black for a gain of $35,000 at the end of the year. Again, that's just a guesstimate. It has been cold in March. That could disappear in a heartbeat. Repair and maintenance, same scenario. Last year, we were $41,372 in the red. We have beautiful facilities, we have beautiful fields, and to keep them in the tip-top shape that they are, we need to make sure that we spend money and make sure we have top-notch quality places for our children to get educated. I have a little chart which is expended in the red, allocated in green. Again, as you take a look for the last 3 years, what was expended and what was allocated, we haven't been able to balance. This year, we project that we will be in the black. I shouldn't say that. We're presently in the black at $16,000 to finish the year out. Energy savings. Just to let you know that we are on top of things and we are working hard to do these things so we can save money. We've adjusted thermostats down at night. We've set back heating timers several hours per day. Reduced lighting where possible inside. Joined an energy collaborative for energy savings. Reduced parking lot lights. Shut down 4 hot water storage tanks at the Clinton Middle School. Asked staff to turn off computer monitors at night. Worked with a consultant on phone savings. We even found a phone line that went up to the old school on Burnett Hill 2 years ago that we were paying on. Replaced ceiling tiles and insulation to 20 Clinton Middle School classrooms. Replaced all the lighting at the Clinton Middle School and the Clinton High School gymnasium. Replaced all the lighting at the old elementary school. The sheet you're looking at presently was given to the school committee when we had to make reductions. We were asked to give a 5% increase. We had to lose $1.1 million. These are the recommendations I made to the school committee. These are actual figures, actual people that were gone and positions that were lost. This was the year after. Again, the recommendation to decrease $781,000. These are the actual positions that I recommended again to be lost. And last year, the same thing, I gave 3 options. Option 3 was taken by the school committee, and those positions were lost. This year is what I've proposed for extra staff. I've asked for these positions. The school committee has tentatively agreed with me, pending the budget outcome and how they vote on the budget. It's tentatively been voted. If you take a look, this is your actual class size for next year, for each grade level. These down here are the new positions that I'm asking for. This is your projected enrollment. This is the present number of groups. This is what we are projecting for groups. This is plus or minus staff. We're asking for an extra staff in grade 4, which we now feel we'd like to move to grade 1. We are taking a teacher out of grade 7 and adding it to grade 8. Again, as you can see, our class sizes are very good. They're 25 and under. We still feel we have a problem in grade 1. We'd like to drop that down to 20 or 21.
Mr. God, while we're talking on class size and growth, how overgrown is the new elementary school with regards to swaying maybe the middle school 4 through 8? Are you getting to that peak yet?
We're getting close. I think the reason we're getting close is because of special programs that we're trying to bring back into the system. I think Michelle Brady, who's our special needs director, has done a great job in bringing people back from the out of district placement,
Right.
saving us a lot of money.
Absolutely.
But to do that, we have to allocate classrooms to be able to run those programs, and that's taking up space.
And how long before do you think that crunch will affect the school system?
That's a tough question to answer. I've got to believe that I think we're okay for the next few years. I really do. But it's something that has to be kept in the back of our mind that we may need at some point in
I
time.
know we always kept that in the background when I
Yep.
was on school committee, that
Yep.
as you grow,
Yep. As you can take a look at the bottom in the Clinton Elementary School, I'm asking for $40,000, one position, a regular ed teacher. At the middle school, a reading specialist, an inclusion teacher, and a technology teacher. And at the high school, one social worker, in the special needs department, a part-time clerk, for a total of $208,615. The next slide that you see is presently what happened at the end of last year. And at the end of last year, this is the actual budget sheet, we were in the red for $132,736.44. That's an actual deficit that we ran in the school department. How did we balance it? We balanced it taking school choice money, and we balanced it with circuit breaker money from special needs. This is also a sheet that we use in special needs, that we allocate for Medicaid money from our children that goes directly into the general fund for this town. Last year, through the school department and the special needs department hard work, we got for the town $406,000, of which none was allocated to the school department. Again, we project this year. Now remember, we're using a secretary in the special needs department, which we don't get any compensation for. We project that we will get to the town over $400,000, $423,451 for the town into the general fund. That's pretty significant. Budget facts. For me to balance the budget for this year, I allocated an extra $100,000 out of school choice so I could reduce class size so our children would get a better education. Again, I just told you that the 2006-07 budget was over by $133,000. Expenditures this year that were not in the budget. So you get a good picture of this. We've added 2 ESL teachers, to the tune of approximately $80,000. Why? Because we needed it. Our children at the Clinton Elementary School in AYP are not making AYP. We owe it to these children. We've been audited by the state, and we needed to bring these teachers in to help these children. We had to hire a part-time school adjustment counselor. We had to hire 10 paraprofessionals to the tune of $140,000. Why? Because a lot of times when you have a special education meeting in an IEP, it demands that you must either get a teacher or a paraprofessional to help that child or that classroom. We added some MCAS help after school at the elementary school for approximately $6,000 for children who did not do well in MCAS the year before. We added an MCAS Saturday morning help at the Clinton Middle School for approximately $6,000. We added a late bus for those children at the elementary school that couldn't get home for approximately $2,000. All of those things that you see there were not allocated in our budget for this fiscal year. Now, are we going to be over budget? I sit here and tell you absolutely. Am I going to be able to cover it? I hope so. I'd like another contract. I don't know. But it's the right thing to do. These kids need help. It's my job to make sure that they get the help, and so be it. Another budget sheet that kind of reflects a little differently, again, down here in the last 2 columns, kind of tells the story. The average over the last 5 years, as I told you before, was under 4%. If you go 6 years before that, it's under 3%. You can't run this budget on the contractual issues that I have, maintenance agreements, keeping the buildings and fields in tip-top shape, keeping up with inflation with heat, gas, fuel, and electricity. It just doesn't work. No, I promised Kathy I wouldn't do that. Kathy, I'm sorry. That was for Eddie Sheridan, but Eddie's gone. Questions, comments?
I think as a caveat, you should explain to the board how there's no mention of food service on there, what a wonderful job David Vaness does for the school system.
Our food service is done independently. David Vaness runs the cafeteria with no help from the school department or from the town. He pays the health insurance, the wages, he buys the food. It's all self-sufficient. He's done a magnificent job. I think if you take a look at the school prices compared to communities around here, he's probably 50 cents lower than anyone around us. He's done a magnificent job. Is he asking for a raise? Did he set you up?
No, it's just that all the time, that's never on there, and I just thought it would be nice to let some of the new board members know that, you know, when they're sitting here saying, hey, there's no food service there. I think it's a real...
Because he mentioned that to me the other day. I was just saying, I'm going to see, did he call somebody?
No cheeseburger basket.
Okay.
Well, your presentation is great.
Thank you.
You doing the presentation?
I hope I've enlightened you.
Oh, very much, very much.
I think you should be proud of the schools.
We are.
I don't think we take a back seat to anyone, and I'm pretty proud of them, and I know that some of you have been products of the Clinton school system, and I know you know how important it is to have a great education. They're our future. What we teach them here, they'll be sitting in those chairs sooner or later. So, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Gow. We appreciate you coming in and updating the board. I'm sure you'll be hearing from us sooner or later.
Just on the special ed, most of your increases in that budget, they're all mandated by the state? So, I mean, your hands are pretty much tied as to the programs you have to offer. And
Absolutely, and the problem, it's not a problem, it isn't a problem. We owe these children their education. And sometimes you have a child that may move into the district, and you don't expect this, we don't anticipate it. We base our budget on the children we have right now. But a child could move into the district that needs an out-of-district placement. He may need residential full-time, or she, which could cost this district well over $200,000, just like that. So that could take that budget and put $200,000 to $300,000 on it by someone just moving in, or even a child in the district that we may have to send out. So, I mean, those are the things you're dealing with. We want to help those children, but the state really isn't helping us. And I don't think that they fund Chapter 7 properly. I think I've talked to Representative Naughton, I've talked about Antonucci, I mean, and they're not giving us a fair share. There's a move on the table, a motion on the table, at least from MASC and MASS, which is the School Committee Association and the superintendents, to go to a 50-50 plan. What is a 50-50 plan? Well, it would take each community and would assess their wage factor. So it would take a look at Clinton and say, what is the average wage factor in Clinton? It would also take a look at what can you raise revenue-wise in Clinton, and give a fair assessment for each community. You know, I've seen some of those figures before, and I think if it does happen, you're going to look at a probably, I'm guessing, but I'm pretty sure, over a $4 million increase in state aid for Clinton, if that ever got to the table, because of where we sit as far as financially, real estate-wise, and our wage factor. So I just don't think, the legislature has done their fair share. I almost feel this. I was talking a little earlier on in the corridor that the legislature almost feels like, listen, we can't do any more, do an override. And you'll see more and more communities asking for an override to increase their tax base. But unfortunately, I see these communities that are doing this, they keep going back and back to the well. And my fear here is this: if we do go for an override and we increase our tax base, does the state say to us, okay, your tax base is now higher, we don't need to give you as much aid as we have in the past? And that is my fear with ever going with an override. I don't feel at this point in time that has ever been explained to a town or a city government, that possibly by raising that, you are creating a catch-22 for yourself. Because now the state aid is not giving you your proper allocation that you need, and next year you want another override and override and override. So I feel that, I've always been hesitant, not only because I don't think the community can handle an override, but I feel like that scenario could possibly play out, especially if you get to a 50-50 scenario where they're going to base you on not only a wage, but what you can raise revenue-wise through your property taxes. If you raise that bar, do we give you less money? So I guess I'm really torn that way, but I don't see the legislature helping us in that matter. It almost feels like they're saying, just do it. I could be wrong. I don't think so.
Does the board want to take any action towards this recommendation of establishing a new line item account that he sent us a letter from? Okay, table it till next meeting? Okay. All righty. We'll take that up at the next meeting, Michael. If you could put that as an agenda item, please. Okay, administrative business, Michael? Sure. So move. Make a motion. Motion by Mary Rose to move the 5-minute recess. Second. Second, any discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Aye.
Crystal Cafe, Gale House Grill, Old Timer, Ringside Cafe, and then yesterday we did get a letter from Breakaway Billiards as well.
What's the pleasure of the board?
To grant late nights closings and evening regulation.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Being none, all
I think, Mr. Chair, on the discussion, if anyone else comes in on, to add to that list.
sure. Michael, so it's been amended that if anybody else comes in.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
The next item is the monthly report for February from the Superintendent of Public Works.
Pleasure of the board? Is there a second? Any discussion?
Just in the discussion, I think, I know I've said it before, mentioned it before, but like I said, I think Chris's report every month is so detailed. You do a great job, Chris. It's terrific.
We appreciate it. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that is the reserve fund transfer request from the sealer weights and measures for $297.
Pleasure of the board? So moved. Is there a second? Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
It's all set.
The next is a reserve fund transfer request from the fire chief to repair damage to the ladder truck. It is a significant amount, so the fire chief asked, well, he indicated he would be here in case the board needed any further information or questions or presentation on that request. So,
Any questions from the board regarding the expenditure?
Yeah, I do. What was the actual damage, Chief? It says to the ladder, what was the actual damage?
After one of the fires, they headed out checking it, and they extended the ladders out. There's some locks to lock the ladders extended. One of them didn't release, and it tore some rungs out of the ladder. That's on the top section. Something we should get fixed right away, where we don't have enough hands to throw the other ladders.
Any other questions?
Just a follow-up. How old is that truck, Rich?
1988. 20 years. It is one that I've mentioned we definitely have to start thinking about replacing.
All those in favor of the transfer, please, no more questions. I'm sorry, Chief.
With these repairs, as you can see in the right-hand column, I eliminated repairing the pump. There's an issue with the pump, but we want to make the ladder work and make it safe, and that be something we can hold off.
So I guess I move to approve the transfer to cover the expense of the ladder truck.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And the next is a additional request for snow and ice expenditure to do further deficit spending from the Superintendent of Public Works for $150,000. And Mr. McGowan is here as well if the board has any questions for him on.
Pleasure of the board.
Just a quick question, if we get snow Friday, is this going to be enough?
It will be close. Depends. If we have to sand, we'll make it. If we have to plow, it won't make it. I don't think we'll have to buy any more salt, even if we go out a couple of times. We have a good plenty, not, maybe half a shed right now. I don't plan on filling it, just because we have spent so much this year. I think we'd be better off waiting until before next winter and filling the shed. But if we have to plow again, I may be back, but I think if we do not have to plow, it should cover at least a couple of sandings. It might be a little bit of money left over. So, keep your fingers crossed.
It's been a long winter.
Yeah. All those in favor?
I move to accept the transfer.
I'll second it.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, I'm a little heavy.
That's all right.
Michael, there's a request to change name on a business.
Right, it's for the All-American Auto Sales. It's the gentleman that was at the depot. He was Main Street Auto Sales. He moved then down the street, changed his name. Now he's finding there's a lot of red tape involved with having to change his whole business name, so he wants to keep the same name of Main Street Auto. So it's the same location, the number of cars, everything's already approved by the board. He's just looking to change his name back to Main Street Auto Sales.
Pleasure of the board.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye.
The next, we received a request from, or a notice from the Massachusetts State Lottery Commission indicating that they were starting to launch their Keno on the Go new game program. It will be available to all current lottery agents in town. It'll be more of an over-the-counter program. It's not going to require any video screens, but now we'll make it available to anyone that is selling scratch tickets currently, and the numbers game can now also do this Keno on the Go. So if a community requests a hearing that their community not participate in this, within 21 days of notice of this letter, the town would have to petition the Lottery Commission for a hearing to make their case and argument as to why this should not be permitted in Clinton.
We've had no request to do so.
We just received a notification from the state, from the lottery.
If we don't respond,
We don't respond.
Right, exactly. If there's no response, then the program will commence.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
Any respect to the appointment, Michael?
This is something we'd like to have the board, we need to start thinking about. The state requires that all communities have an inspector of animals that gets appointed each year. We currently have a dog officer. Our dog officer has always graciously tried to respond to animal calls. I know he's addressed the board in the past about the volume of calls, especially cat calls that he's been getting, and that he feels it's, it was over and above what he was really hired for. But if there's a case or an isolated incident, he has been willing to respond. However, the regulations are getting much more difficult and complex, and the state is getting much tougher on ensuring that all communities are in compliance. So in April of each year, we're required to make an appointment and submit a name to the state, and just wanted to start a discussion with the board if we formally wanted to have Steve Mudgett do that. We have put his name down in the past, but it was only, again, just in just kind of a coverage mode. It wasn't really an official, that official capacity. So if it's something that we would want to change his job duties and look at that whole classification of the position, or put out for notice to see if somebody else is interested, or however the board would like to pursue it. So the appointment time is coming due, and wanted to try to have some discussion on how we proceed.
When is the appointment?
Usually in April of each year, we need to notify the state that we're designating somebody for the upcoming year.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that perhaps we would ask Mr. Mudgett if we could put his name down and follow-up discussion during the budget process.
Sure. Is there a second to that? Any further discussion?
Yeah, just on the discussion. It's a job classification change. I mean, should we have the personnel board look at it, or is it not?
I'm just saying, if it has to be approved by April 1st, just to see if Mr. Mudgett is willing to, in the application, put his name, and then, we could follow up with discussion, because we're not too close, we're not too far away from April 1st, obviously,
Right,
so. I'm just saying that I think to get something back to the state so that we're in compliance, because I think it says there's a $500 penalty, if you don't submit the form. So that's all I'm saying, and then just follow up with it.
Right, and Selectman Dickow is correct that it is a personnel board position, but it needs to come from a request from the appointing authority of the department. So I think the board needs to discuss with Mr. Mudgett developing the position, and then you can make the request to reclassify to the personnel board. Okay.
All right. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
The next is just kind of an FYI. On March 13th, the Mass Highway conducted a public hearing on the design of the Water Street Bridge. It's getting closer to being final design. They would like to go out to bid in the spring of 2009. Because of the condition of the bridge, they're hoping to push up that date closer so that they can get started earlier. There's one issue that they brought to our attention that day that we need to work on, And that is up to the town of Clinton to secure all of the easements and rights-of-ways that will be needed. They're gonna do some work in the intersection there, as well as replace the bridge. But we would have to take any slivers of property that we might need to widen the road or to put a little turning radius in the road. So they have submitted us a package, and I would like to work with the Superintendent of Public Works and our town solicitor to take a look at that package and try to come up with some wording that we need to do at town meeting. Our hope is to get an article on this town meeting so that we can get those easements approved by the town and out of the way, because the state won't put out the bid unless we've done our part. Although it's not till next spring, they could potentially be advertising before our next town meeting. So if we're able to get on this town meeting, we can really get a leg up on the process, so.
Mr. Chairman, also move that we go
I'll
forward.
second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
Chris and Michael, I think.
On the town,
Right, and it would be a legal wording for a town meeting, so Mr. Gibbons can work with us on that.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, do we have any public comment before we go into executive session?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, just, I know that, we have
Oh, the parade?
the parade, and, I mean, I just think it would be something nice for the town to support
Sure.
our neighbor and community.
Yep, I was gonna bring that up at the next meeting in
Oh.
April, but that's fine. We have a packet, a letter in our packet from the town of West Boylston. They're having their bicentennial parade on September 21st, inviting the Clinton Board of Selectmen and other towns to any other facet of our town that would like to join in. Maybe you want to send a memo up to the high school bands to see if they'd like to partake in any other part of our town. Maybe the senior steppers or any of those folks.
Sure, contact the West Boylston and see what they'd be looking for.
Yep.
Sure,
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay, anything else?
And also, just the other two items, there were issues on the water regulations and the ambulance collection service that were discussed during the budget discussions. The Superintendent of Public Works and the Fire Chief have provided paperwork to further go ahead on those discussions. And since they were here tonight, if the board did have any questions, they could address it. If it's something we want to do in further budget talks, we can.
I'd rather prematurely, as Mary Rose had spoken in the past with regards to the fire department, I'd like to talk about that at budget time. Anybody else, how's the other board members feel on that, with regards to collections of the ambulance? I'd like to do that at budget time so that we can.
Well,
I know
Unless you want to do it.
yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to do that in the budget. I think if it's revenue that we should be collecting, then I think we shouldn't wait for a budget process. I think we should do it now. I mean,
Do you want to come forward, Chief, so that we could start the process?
I don't have a whole lot of information with me, but I'll go from what I recall.
Okay. I guess what we're looking to achieve is to bring in some extra revenue with the uncollectibles. And you have a company that works with the fire department now that tries to collect.
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
Okay.
can I just refresh
Sure.
my, as I understood it, Rich, we had a gentleman for years, Clintonian gentleman, that used to go after the insurances, and that we never went back and tried to charge any Clintonian for it. Now, is that the revenue that you're looking for? Or are you talking about the insurance revenue?
This could be anything that's not paid.
So you're talking about going back?
Right now, somebody gets a bill, or their insurance company gets a bill, and they pay 80% of it. Well, the 20%, we send out 3 bills right now. We do inform them there's a waiver process. If you can't afford it, you can fill out a form, tell us your earnings, and sign it, and we will waive it if somebody's really up against it. What we're looking at here is the ones that don't respond to our 3 bills that the town sends out, or the people that don't have insurance. We'd have a collection agency that would actually go after them and file claims, whatever they have to do. They do charge us 50% of whatever we collect.
How much do they charge?
50%.
50%?
The one I was talking to.
Okay.
A number of years ago, when we signed up with Comstar, I believe our agreement at that time was that it's 5% for the people we collect with the 3 bills. And then they'd go to collection for 15%. But the company's been sold to a couple times, and I don't believe that they do it at all anymore. So this is another company they recommended.
Well, I would be adamantly opposed to any kind of going after Clintonian and giving 50% of it to a company
Oh,
in
absolutely.
collection, so.
Part of the
I'm just
problem
not-
I see with it, and I have to agree with you, is that there's means for us to get the money from the Clintonians. You know, we can attach stuff, we can file. The people that we can't chase, or we have trouble chasing, are the people from out of town. The ones that are coming through town, they get in an accident, may not have a real address, or you can't keep up with their addresses and their changes, that 3 months down the road, we can't find them. Them are the ones that have a tendency to get away with it totally, where our people that are paying the taxes and paying our bills for the ambulance service, I have trouble with going after them.
See, my understanding is that we just went after the insurance companies and that we didn't go back for a collection on the Clintonians.
Well, the insurance companies are paying, I think if it's an 80-20, right, it's that 20% that they're not.
Yeah, but in the past, I don't think we ever went after that 20% is what I'm saying.
I think it's probably been, since mid-90s, they've all gotten bills. In other words, the insurance pays the 80, we'll send them bills. A lot of them do pay it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they paid, fine, but
Yeah.
I don't think we ever went and attached
haven't.
anything or pursued it, you know, in a legal
Yeah.
perspective.
We haven't pursued it at all so far, and I think this is the indication I got from the board that they wanted to take a look at.
The only reason why is, I believe, I was meeting over here, the revenue was $90,000 that was uncollected.
Yeah, but how much of that is from out of towns?
We didn't.
You know, I mean, I just, you know, I'm going to be right up front. I think just about everybody is stretched to the limit. I mean, we're seeing, you know, gas prices that people never paid before, electric bills going up, everything that, I mean, I went to the grocery store today and I was astonished at the price from one week to the next, what people are paying just to feed themselves. And I think that, you know, to go after this, again, I'd like to see how much of it is for out-of-towners and how much is actual, what Clintonians, you know, how much of that percentage is actual Clintonians. That's just
I
my-
can get that report, I believe, or I'll try to.
Okay. So we don't want to take it.
Well, I mean, that's just my claim.
I just think if you don't pay, it doesn't matter where you're from, you have to pay your bills. I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
mean-
the appeal of it, you know? I don't care if you're from Clinton or East Oshkosh, I mean, if you don't pay, you have to
Yeah,
pay
I mean,
bills.
yeah, but I think you have to look at some cases too, Joe. It might be someone that had to use the ambulances and is a very sick person, is maybe out of work and really short on money. I think every individual case is different. I mean, it's not like,
Well, there's a process for
you know, well, I'm just saying how I feel about it. You know, whatever the majority of the board decides, that's fine. You know, you live by the will of the board, and I'm just telling you how I feel about it. That's just my take on it.
I don't think this is a.
I mean, I just want to see some statistics further to see just how much of that is.
Could we do a survey, Chief, and get back to us at our next meeting as to some numbers so that we could take a good hard stern look at the
Basically.
process itself?
Okay.
I mean, what they're charging here, you know, 50% of their collection, I mean, that's not a really good deal, I don't think either.
No.
No, I think we should be able to shop around and see if there's anything better.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Public comment?
Actually, do you do this? Water regulation?
Oh, just a minute. Water regulations first?
Yeah.
Old and new, very well.
I think you all have the memo here. During the winter time, we try to replace as many broken water meters as we can. Sometimes we have very quick response, sometimes we have no response. This year we had really, maybe about half of the people we sent letters to responded. After the half that responded, we replaced their meters. The other half, we actually called as many of them as we possibly could get a hold of, and left messages on their phones, and maybe 10% of those got back to us after the phone call, if that. So what's happened is, the people who are responding are getting their meters replaced and they're paying their fair share. The people who don't respond, we have no way of forcing them to get their meter replaced. If they don't get a hold of us, we can't break into their house to get it. So I just thought up this policy of, giving them a second notification through registered mail, and then if they don't respond within 30 days of that, there'd be a fine of $500, and if they don't respond and pay the fine within 30 days, we shut their water off, which sounds a little harsh, but, the people who are not replacing these meters are getting free water when the people who do replace their meters are not. It's a free service. We don't charge a nickel to replace the meter. We just need somebody there to let us in. And I don't even really care that much about the $500 fine. I think the threat of the $500 and the threat of the shutting off water will be enough. And if we weren't happy with the $500 fine, because it's pretty steep, we could just say shut the water off, because then you're guaranteed you're going to get a response. And, other towns around do shut water. I know Sterling shuts water off if you don't pay your bill. If you're late on your bill, they shut your water off. And we don't do that. We lean it, and eventually we get our money, and I'd rather go that route. I don't want to shut water off. But a lot of the people who aren't calling us because they know they're paying half of what they should be paying, and that's why they don't return our calls. So we need something in there, and I'm willing to discuss, obviously, exactly what we do, but this was a start, and it basically gives them 90 days to get back to us. By the time it's all said and done, 60 before there's even a fine. So there's plenty of time for these people to get back to us. They're just not, because it's cheaper for them not to.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board to adopt this policy?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we adopt the policy and make sure that the town council reviews the language to make sure that the town is on.
Is there a second to that?
Sure, I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I think it's a good common sense way to get people to comply.
Yeah. It's the only,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
I had one more thing. Remember during the budget time, we were talking about how my salary is set, and we were just going to bring it up because Kevin and Mary Rose and actually Bob weren't here. Basically, my salary, the way I read the Mass General laws, is my salary is supposed to be set by the Board of Selectmen. Currently, it's set by the Personnel Board. The Personnel Board sets the grid. They're a policy-making board, and I'm certainly am not an expert at reading Mass General laws, but the way I read it, my compensation is supposed to be set by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Selectmen only. There are other positions such as Superintendent of Streets. It says by the Board of Selectmen or the town, but the Superintendent of Public Works, which includes water, sewer, or both, as well as the streets, it's specific that it's supposed to be set by the Board of Selectmen. I know a lot of my colleagues actually have contracts where they'll have a 3-year contract. Some of them just have salary set. They have different ways of doing it. But I guess what I wanted you to do is take these, and maybe I could get Bob to look into if that's in fact how it should be done, because I would prefer my salary and possibly even entering into a contract. I don't have a problem with that, but I'd prefer to deal with the people who are my bosses, basically you five, instead of dealing with a personnel board. It's a personnel board, I think, in my view, is more geared towards the day-to-day positions in here, not, I'm a manager in charge of 25, 26 people, and right now, there are other people in the town hall who actually are at the same grade as me, and, they'll have maybe a half a person under them, and I don't believe it's right the way it is, and again, regardless of that, I don't think we're following the Mass General laws.
I think there's a lot of merit to what Chris is saying, so I would recommend that we have town council look it over and see if it's a viable.
I have a little package of some stuff. He's got obviously way more resources than I do to find this stuff, but there's different things, including, I don't know if you have a copy of the personnel bylaws, and Clinton, I have that too, so.
Okay,
Chris, let's take a copy of that package.
That's, I made this for you anyways.
okay. Anything else, Christopher?
That's it.
Thank you.
I might as well wait.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to still stay in open session with the RFP too. We have, just to let the folks know, Saturday, April 26th is going to be Town of Clinton Recycling Collection Day over at the Clinton Recycling Center. Items that are going to be collected are going to be tires, passenger tires, $2, truck tires, 20 inches and up, $9, car batteries, $3, gas grill cylinders, $5, refrigerators, all doors must be removed, $20, air conditioners, $20, appliances, $15, computers, televisions, $15, VCRs, $5, upholstered furniture, $25 and up, mattresses, $15 and up, box springs, $15 and up. Again, we'll be announcing this again to remind you all, but this is just to start off with our spring cleanup. I will take public comment at this time.
Sir? Okay, good. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Dick Shepard from Sterling. I'm a selectman, I'm a fellow selectman from the town of Sterling. And I'll start off on the light side. Congratulations to all of you for hiring Tony Zahara-Harris. He was a very good building inspector, in my opinion, in the town of Sterling. You'll be very happy with him. He did a good job, I believe, for us, and we're sorry to see him go. So, with that said, I'm here to ask you a couple of things, actually. One is that I noticed going into executive session this evening to discuss the conservation restriction on the Wiki lands located within the boundaries of Sterling. And I would hope that you would consider signing that conservation restriction as originally crafted by the legislature in 2004. That would obviously please many of us in Sterling greatly. Secondly, I would hope that I could get from you after your deliberations tonight a copy of the bid as submitted by Nestle. And I talked with Michael about that on Friday, and I was able to glean facts out of it. Unfortunately, as you may know, some of the data was misconstrued and put out in the newspaper on Saturday, and that created a lot of concern. And I think Nancy Sterling from Nestle ended up having to write a summarization of that in order to get it out to a number of people to correct many of those errors. So I'd like to beg your indulgence on that one and try to get a copy of that from you tonight if possible. And lastly, you had a letter from us a few weeks back, I know, and you looked at it and you said you weren't going to entertain that letter until after you received the bid notification. I would invite you again to review that letter and to sit down and talk with us, both boards together. If you'd like, we could open it to the public. If you feel uncomfortable with that, I guess we could at least start off with an initial meeting. And I think it would be wise for the both boards to sit down. We sat down last week, a little bit more than a week ago, with the residents of the town. We got over 400 signatures with another 600 promised of people who are against this particular proposal from the town of Sterling standpoint. And I want to make sure that these residents are fully informed so that they understand exactly where this is going. And I do think that if we get together as a group, both boards, I think we could certainly set forth our positions in this, as opposed to maybe just being on a monetary position or on a land ownership position. I think that we would certainly like to be able to tell the residents of Sterling with a little bit more definition as to exactly how this is going to come about. There's an awful lot of concern about truck traffic, which I think as a board we know that's a
I think there's an awful lot of concern over nothing.
Well,
at this point,
you may
say so, but I can tell you right now, it's generated a great deal of interest in Sterling.
Those people up in Sterling have a lot of time on their hands, apparently.
A lot of them are doing a lot of blogging.
Yeah, unnecessarily.
Well, late at night in many cases, so. But they have,
Excuse me, I'd just like to stop for just
Okay.
say, I think we have to have respect for our neighboring towns. And
agree.
I respect the fact that they think there's going to be some impact on their community. And I think in fairness to Sterling and Lancaster, I don't know if Lancaster had any concerns, but I think we have to respect the fact that they may have legitimate concerns. And I think they have to be duly respected for their concerns, Mr. Chairman. That's all.
I fully understand, Mary Rose, but I think there's a lot of hubbub over nothing.
Well, that may be, Mr. Chairman.
Well,
I think there's a way of addressing the issue, that's all.
in some cases, that's where it all starts. And it continues to roll until the snowball gets so big that when it finally hits, it destroys a lot of things. So I would hope that you would entertain our suggestion that we sit down and meet. Again, I think Mr. Suschek, a member of the board, has indicated that it would be to be held here in Clinton at a venue that you might choose, maybe an auditorium, something that might take some of the residents that had some interest, or we could certainly have it in the Choxton School in Sterling, which is a large auditorium that we use for our town meeting purposes. We're flexible, I think, either way, but we would certainly entertain our getting together as a group. So.
I'm sure when we're ready, we'll be happy to meet.
Okay, I'm just carrying forth the message.
No problem. If you want to stick around, we're going to be talking about the Nestle RFP in public.
Could I get an answer as to whether we could get a copy of that or not?
You could have it right now. If the newspapers had it, I don't know why you didn't get it.
Well, the newspapers don't have it. The only people that have gotten it are the Board of Selectmen.
How did it get circulated out to the newspapers then? That's interesting. Sure, Mr. Burgoyne.
Good evening, members of the Board of Selectmen and Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Burgoyne, and I'm counsel to Nestle Waters, which submitted an RFP. And as you know, we have entered into a dialogue for many months with both the Clinton Board of Selectmen and your staff and your department heads, as well as the Clinton Board, as well as the Sterling Board. And I would like to thank you on behalf of my client, as well as Mr. Shepard and his board, for hearing us publicly. As you know, just to kind of set the stage for the benefit of the public who might not have had a whole lot of background on this, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but at Nestle's invitation, or at Nestle's request, you allowed Nestle to do some feasibility testing of the resource area at the Wiki-Piki watershed, which has been an unused water supply resource owned by the town of Clinton. And as you know from the public presentation we made in terms of the hydrogeology back in December, a lengthy presentation, which we also presented to the Sterling Board at their request in January. Nestle concluded as a result of the testing that while the quantity of water that they felt could safely be withdrawn without any impacts to the aquifer were not what they'd hoped, but there still was enough to make it economically worthwhile to make a significant capital investment. And this board, in order to entertain any proposals, felt in fairness you ought to do it through the 30B process. We had no problem and agreed with that, so that everybody would have a fair shot at submitting a proposal. We submitted a proposal in detail, which I know you've had an opportunity to see now, and that was due last Friday. And while that process has been going on since, for the last 4 or 5 months, because the prospect of Nestle potentially entering into an arrangement with Clinton to purchase water has become public information, and there's been public input, we felt compelled to respond to some concerns that were raised, even though we didn't know yet if we would be the only bidder or the best bidder, or if you would even be willing to enter into a proposal with us. But in order to sort of fend off misinformation at the pass, we've held a number of meetings. We've reached out to various groups who want information on it. We've held a meeting we've invited abutters to the Wiki-Piki area to a meeting at the Choxton Inn and presented them with information to bring them up to date. But we have not been able to discuss economic proposals, obviously, until we presented it through you officially. So in summary, I think you know that the proposal, which, by the way, we did not feel that we should share that publicly with either the press or with the public or the town of Sterling until we were sure, as a courtesy to you, that you had all had it, and so we wanted to sort of use this as the milestone in which to do that, and we're happy to do it. I know that Sterling had a meeting last week that they called to, hear information from the public about their concerns. They heard a lot of information. They heard a lot of opposition, which we hope, with a dialogue and with providing them with more factual information and discussion, that they would be willing to keep open minds and entertain discussions if the town of Clinton chooses to go forward. We've made a proposal. You've seen it. I'm here as a resource for you to talk about it, answer any questions you have, and obviously we will provide the Sterling board and the press and interested abutters with the details of our proposal. But in summary, the proposal, and I have to say, just in terms of the order in which I'm here, I've heard the state here tonight talk about how they're $1 billion in the red, and the school system wants more money, and I represent a private corporation that's proposing to provide some economic revenue to 2 towns. And the essence of the proposal, once it flushes out, would provide annual revenue to Clinton and Sterling, which would make us among the top 10 taxpayers, equivalent to the top 10 taxpayers. So, if we were proposing to do that as a tax-paying basis, I'm sure that both communities would be, many communities would be looking to offer TIFs, for a taxpayer that would come in and provide $200,000 to $300,000 worth of annual revenue. So having said that, it would not be an easy process. It would be complicated. We would have to enter into, a legally binding agreement with Clinton. In order to do that, it would have to be ratified by your town meeting. That would happen down the road. It's obvious that in order to get permitting, in order to get authorizations in Sterling, it would require town meeting action by the town of Sterling. It would not be without opposition. But nevertheless, we hope that in the future weeks and months, we could enter into a three-way dialogue with the 2 communities. There are obviously, with or without Nestle, it's apparent from the publicity that's come out that there's issues that have to be resolved, and festering wounds that exist between the 2 communities over the Wiki-Piki watershed, which we think can be resolved with some good dialogue. And I heard what Mr. Shepherd said tonight, and I agree with him that there needs to be some good dialogue between the 2 boards, for the future relationship of the communities, with or without Nestle. And we are here as a resource, and we hope to be part of that process and to work with you to structure a proposal that would be a win-win for everybody, as we said in December, and would be an economically viable proposal with no harm to the environment. So, having said that, I'm here to answer any questions you have on the RFP to the extent that I can. And I've heard enough about it and talked enough about it with my client over the past several months, so I think I know most of the details. So I'm here.
We had an opportunity, we'd like to deal with it, is they had an opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to read the proposals here.
The press was here, Michael, when
There was someone from the Landmark and somebody from the Times and Courier. Those are the only 2 people from the press that were here. So, but we did not, it was available for public inspection, but there were no copies given out. And I know there's been other media that has picked up the story, and I didn't give any information to them, so I don't know where they got the information. Until my board had a chance to review it, I wasn't going to provide it to anybody else until you were able to see it yourselves.
So are we able to now, at this point, Bob, can hand this out?
Yes.
Do we have copies ready to hand out, Michael?
Well, we have the original proposal, so I mean, we can give them an original proposal, but it would take some time to photocopy, but I can give an original. If it's to Sterling, I would do. I don't think I would give them to the press because I only have about 2 of them.
Sure.
So I'll give one to Sterling, and then the other ones, they can make requests for copies. So.
I mean, this is just the starting point. It's the first
Proposal, right? So it's just the start. It doesn't.
Just to make it clear, the proposal isn't, recognizing that the The board, just based on the structure of the bylaws in the town of Clinton, does not have authority without a town meeting vote to enter into a binding agreement. We recognize that, and actually recognized that many months ago, and felt that the best way to present a proposal to the town would be to make a proposal that was more in the nature of a letter of intent, and just try to structure it in as much detail as possible, not just to include potential, water purchase, terms of a water purchase contract from Clinton, but also the terms that we would provide on behalf of Clinton to the town of Sterling, the resident community, that Nestle would be making. So that's how the structure of the agreement is. We also attach the concept plan we presented to you that shows the physical mechanics of how the project would work if it was implemented, and obviously it would all be subject and contingent upon appropriate DEP permitting and filing of an ENF and getting MEPA review. So, there's other potential, zoning actions that might have to be taken. There might have to be curative legislation. There's a lot of potential contingencies in there, but to embark on the process, the concept here is that Nestle would undertake to do it, subject to a town meeting vote, would undertake it all at their expense. Their proposal is to purchase water from the existing resource, spring water, which they would fully permit at no expense. They would take all the steps to get the appropriate permitting, install all the infrastructure. They would potentially use all or portions of the easement line that currently exists from the Weeki-Peeki down to Route 12 to site a loadout station in an appropriately situated industrially zoned area in the vicinity of Route 12, and essentially purchase the water, and the water would go into trucks that would be going onto Route 190 to be bottled at a bottling plant in Framingham, which Nestle currently has. We already know, and just so I can sort of summarize the summary of the economics, we already know from the testing that was done and from the reasonable experience of our hydrogeological team that based on the pump test results done in September, that there would be a permittable yield of somewhere between 60 and 90 million gallons a year. Now, how does that get arrived at? Well, it's based on the permitting process is based on a maximum withdrawal per day. And as a practical matter, Nestle, their bottling plant in Framingham only works 5 days a week. And, so we're not talking about 365 days a year. We're talking about, and the DEP doesn't permit it any way other than a maximum gallonage per day. So we're looking at approximately 250,000 gallons per day. Somewhere, I think the number we've used is 240,000. And what that translates that to in terms of the proposed water purchase rate would be something in the neighborhood of between $200,000 and $300,000 a year to the town of Clinton, with the expectation that Clinton would not pay any of the costs of infrastructure permitting. All of that would be done at Nestle's expense. Nestle would obviously have to do a substantial amount of infrastructure. 3 pumps would have to be installed in shelters. They'd have to upgrade the pipeline, sleeve the pipes most likely, purchase a piece of property, permit and build a loadout station, which is really a fairly small mechanized facility somewhere in the town of Sterling. They would have to acquire any property easements or other rights necessary if it's not in line with the current pipeline. Conservatively speaking, Nestle would have to spend approximately $4 to $5 million to do those infrastructure improvements. So rather than just be a water customer of Clinton, where we're a commercial user located in Clinton along a water line where we would ask to be hooked up and pay your going rate, this is intended to reflect a significant capital infrastructure cost to the town of Clinton's owned infrastructure, none of which we would own. The minute we build it, it would be owned by the town of Clinton. Obviously, we would have to work closely with the town of Sterling and their permitting authorities to do this. We would have to work with the state authorities, perhaps the legislative authorities. So it would be, a very complicated and intricate process. To move it forward, we would work with I think taking up on the theme that Mr. Shepherd suggested, I think there needs to be a three-way dialogue. We obviously recognize that there's a lot of neighbors in Sterling who have concerns about whether or not the withdrawal of that quantity of water might impact their wells or their private water supplies. We have been assured, and that we can assure the neighbors, that will not be the case, that the amount of water that Nestle is proposing to withdraw from a cluster of 3 wells in the Weeki-Peeki in the shallow bed overburden aquifer, which is only between 10 and 30 feet deep, is a fairly minor yield compared to, for example, by way of comparison, the town of Sterling's own cluster of 3 wells off of Redemption Rock Trail, which withdraws in the summer 1.2 to 1.3 million gallons per day. So by way of comparison, we don't think that there's any realistic threat of anybody losing their private wells. But to alleviate that concern, we have included in our proposal a proposed structure of a well guarantee that Nestle will furnish to abutters within a reasonable radius of the site, set up through a process which is yet to be defined, but which will guarantee them that if their water dries up due to any activities of Nestle, without them having to hire a battery of Philadelphia lawyers and hydrogeologists to prove it, that there'll be a relatively fast mechanism for them to get their well replaced and not have to hook up to town water and pay to be a water customer. We're so sure of our science, what we're saying to Sterling is, we're prepared to put our corporate guarantee behind your wells. The exact wording and structure of that is open for discussion and dialogue. We hope to engage the Sterling officials and their hydrogeologists. We've offered to engage, to reimburse Sterling for a hydrogeologist to evaluate our proposal and assure them at our expense that they're not going to have any hydrogeological problems or damage to the natural resources. And finally, what we hope to do is by providing a stream of revenue to the town of Clinton on an annual basis over a long-term period for a resource that is currently trickling down the Weeki-Peeki Brook into the Natural River and not benefiting anyone, to provide a stream of revenue to both you and the town of Sterling to work toward preserving the open space resource and, with or in conjunction with the proposed conservation restriction that has been ongoing, before we even arrived on the scene with the Commonwealth. And by doing that, to provide a stream of income that we know you need to maintain the dams that exist at the Weeki-Peeki. On that score, I think from the proposal, we have proposed specifically an upfront capital payment of $100,000 dedicated toward the maintenance of the dams and improvements necessary for the dams, and an additional $20,000 per year stipend, again, for those dams. Now, that's in the face of numbers you've heard that are very preliminary ballpark estimates as to costs that might exist or the Clinton might be faced with to upgrade those dams over the next several years. First of all, it should be clear that the only dams that Nestle, the only portion of the resource that Nestle is looking at, is the Lindy, Upper Lindy, Lower Lindy, and the Spring Basin area. So that Nestle's proposal would in no way impact the Fitch Basin or the Haywood Reservoir, which are 2 very large basins up there, and which would always also be available if Clinton needed those for other resources or for providing water to sister communities or wanted to use those resources otherwise. So we've limited our focus on a very defined area within a 200-acre portion of the Weeki-Peeki, which, as you know, is almost 600 acres. So that's in essence some of the physical and as quickly as I can, some of the physical and economic terms. There's obviously a lot more detail in there, but I wanted to give you and the public a quick understanding of the proposal and how we think it's really a necessary. It's necessarily a partnership of 2 communities, and we think that if the board has a desire to go forward with it, that there has to be some dialogue and communication, and we're prepared to participate and encourage that, and stand ready to answer your questions or assist you in that process. So, thank you, and I am available for any questions.
But, you know, I was under the assumption that, and I guess maybe I assumed wrong, but I thought that the Board of Selectmen would have had an opportunity to sit down with the Superintendent of Public Works, Town Council, and our town administrator to basically go through the proposal that we received and to formulate, you know, some questions in our own mind, to have dialogue with Jim, if it be the representative from Nestle's, and not to have that all transpire tonight, because, you know, so I mean, no.
Tonight was just to
Yeah,
open the door,
yeah.
Mary.
I knew that this would be the first meeting you had, and just wanted to be here, available to answer questions you have. I realize you haven't had a chance to digest.
Michael thought we should open it up in an open dialogue, and then whatever course of action we choose, then we take the next steps.
So I really don't get the impression that we're trying to, you know, force any kind of vote or decision.
No, I mean, I wouldn't be prepared to do it, Jim, because, I mean, I think there's a lot of technical language here, and, you know, again, I just thought that we were going to go a different process, that's all.
Yeah, and the process is really up to you. It's you know, we stand ready to participate with you folks and with Sterling. If it goes forward, it's clearly going to involve that dialogue with Dick's board. You know, and they've been very good and patient. You know, to some extent, because there's a certain amount of information, you know, blogs and emails and newspaper coverage and all of this stuff that, some of which is good information, some of which is totally inaccurate information and false impressions. And you know, obviously there are people who have already taken very hard positions on this question. And so we just really feel that the necessity is there to get out the information. And really all I wanted to do tonight is you know, just represent that we started this with your permission, so we felt the need to follow through with it, we've been working with your administrator, your DPW superintendent, your town council, present and past, and maintain a willingness to do that. We know that you have pressure on you, for example, to finalize the conservation restriction, which was really totally independent of anything that Nestle, you know, would have proposed out there, which is really goes back a number of years, but it's a complicated issue, and we know how it interrelates with the Rauscher Farm grant and all of some of these other issues. So we've tried to take all of that into consideration. We're not responsible for it, but we can work with it, you know, with it or without it. But we don't want to see Clinton harmed, so we're willing to work quickly to get that done if that's the direction you want to go. So, you know, if you have any questions tonight, I'm here to answer them. If not, if you just want to decide on a process to go forward.
Basically, that's the direction I was looking for the board to go tonight. Michael asked that we open it up in an open session. We have, and now I'll just
Very good.
go whatever the direction of the board.
Yeah, I think that, Mr. Chairman, that in order to determine whether you're going to pursue, I think that's an open meeting type of issue.
Right.
Once you pick a path and you need to develop a strategy or negotiation,
Absolutely.
I think we can then do further executive session in
Chair
detail.
Rose suggested
Right, for that, yeah.
So does the board have a preference in which direction we want to move with regards to accepting the proposed RFP from this?
I'm unsure at this point.
Okay. Motion to take under advisement, and we can do some further soul searching? Or do you not want to accept it at all and just... It's up to the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, it's a proposal. I think we need to take a hard look at it and you know.
Then I'd suggest a motion to take under advisement and
So
bring
moved,
back
Mr. Chair.
next meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. We'll bring it back at our next meeting to see what direction the board wants to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board.
We will be going into executive session under Article 6 to talk about the Weeki-Peaky conservation restriction. We are coming back in again to talk about Rocher Farm executive session, and we may possibly come back into open session. Okay, Elston?
Thank you for hearing me. My name is Jennifer Belrose, and I would like to make a formal complaint against Mr. Stephen Mudgett. I am the cause behind Mr. Mike Ward bringing the animal inspector situation up to you this evening. He did not address me being attacked last Wednesday by my neighbor's cat.
Can I just stop you for 1 second? He doesn't have to respond to cat calls.
Regarding possibly rabid animal, according to Mike Cahill, the state ranger.
He's a dog officer. He's not an animal control officer, but I'd be happy to go right ahead. But I just want to let you know up front, and I don't know if Mr. Ward told you that or not, but he does not respond to those kind of calls. Go right ahead.
I'm just going by what the state rabies coordinator, Mike Cahill, told me, that in the absence of an animal inspector, which he said that he's had many contacts with Mr. Ward in regards to the town becoming compliant on that situation, that he at least needs to address when there's a possible rabid animal situation. And he told me to relay the message to Mike Ward, which I did via leaving a message that he would have found, that the town was to appoint an animal inspector within 24 hours or the town would be fined the $500 a day. In which case I did get a phone call back from Mike Ward, which was very nice. Thank you, I appreciate it. Stating that Mr. Mudgett was going to go out and deal with the situation. But this needs to be addressed better. I mean, maybe he's a great guy, I don't know, but the
They laughed him out of the town hall when he brought forward this several years ago. Last year we had a situation with 22 cats abandoned down on Rigby Road. He went out on his own, caged them up and brought them. And because he knew somebody, they were going to charge him $450 a cat. So it's been an ongoing problem, and I really apologize that you've had to go through this.
I can understand abandoned cats. That should be something that should be dealt with in a different situation. I'm a president of one of the local humane societies in the area. I'm also a surgical technician at the MSPCA in Boston. So I deal with that a lot, but this is a situation where I've got a cat that has wounds all over its head, so it qualifies for a 45-day quarantine on top of the 10-day quarantine. I mean, as you can see, I got 5 bite wounds. I've been in and out of the hospital 4 times on different antibiotics. My legs look like scratching posts because this cat, and this is the second time this has happened in which I've notified, this happened 3 weeks ago, where I got attacked. Skin was not broken. I notified Mr. Mudgett as well, because the cat had a huge abscess on its neck, and it didn't get exposed to my cat. All of this, I mean, even just a phone call from him saying, I'm a dog officer, I don't do that, and helping me understand what channels to go through would have been better than hearing nothing from him. Didn't return the police officers' phone calls.
Again, I will stop again and say that I think he was cautioned in the past not to respond to cat calls.
Okay.
I think he's just following, and I'm not sticking up because he's my brother-in-law. He was the dog officer long before I became a selectman, and I know that this is not a one-time incident, correct, Michael? Where this has come up with cats and...
cats, no, absolutely with the volume of cats.
Yeah,
Steve,
he gets a lot of calls for
Steve
this.
has always been good about, he responds to bites though.
Right.
Steve has always been willing to hand handle if there was a rabid case or there was a
Mhm.
homeowner that had an animal in their house or something or other. He has been good to respond to that. But yeah, the volume of cats and having to go get 20 cats every time somebody moves out of an apartment, he has brought that up and said that that's too much for his department to handle. And Steve did get involved in this case as well. I mean,
Mhm.
Steve has spoken to Mr. Cahill, he has taken action. I don't have the details of that, but I know
Yeah.
I referred it to Steve, and he's indicated that he has talked to the state, and he has talked to the cow owner in this case, but I don't have an update to give.
I agree with you. We need to take action against this, and animal control is the way of the future in this business, but
I started a conversation with you that I'd be more than willing, with the local, both Volunteer Humane Society and the MSPCA to help out in that department.
anything you could do, we'd appreciate it.
You've got my number, feel free to get, I have some business cards here, but, I mean, this situation, and maybe he just, again, he doesn't know. I mean, I gave packets to everybody with all the laws and everything in them. But again, Mike, from my understanding from Mike Cahill, is that he's got to approve the person for the animal inspector. And he wanted me to relay that he didn't know if he would be on board with having Mr. Mudgett as an animal inspector, and I suggested this meeting that maybe it should be opened up to other people to possibly come on board, either have him remain as the dog officer and somebody else as the animal inspector, and get some new blood into the system, or do either a full-time position or part-time position of doing both of those things.
Can I just a follow, Mr. Chairman? Why would Mr. Cahill express to you that he would be reluctant to appoint Mr. Mudgett or accept his name?
Mike Cahill actually came out and told me that Clinton is in the top 5 worst towns regarding animal issues, and laughed at me when I told him about my bite wounds. He's like, it's just happened to be a coincidence that it happened to you, and because him and I have known each other for 11 years, working together. I've been down here in humane work and as a certified veterinary technician, and I've gone to his lectures and working with the MSPCA and their law enforcement department. Maybe he just felt compelled to give me that personal opinion of the situation.
How long has Mr. Cahill been in his position?
I'm not too sure.
Because I will tell you, I was off the board for 4 years, but I don't ever remember a piece of correspondence coming in from his agency talking about any deficiencies with the town of Clinton.
He told me that he's spoken to Mike Ward on several occasions. He actually gave me Mike Ward's name and phone number without even looking it up.
But I mean, is this something recent? Because I don't ever recall.
No, he's not called with complaints. He's called about wanting to have an official person certified.
Yes.
And that's where we need to determine.
But then this is only recently.
Right, but Steve has been appointed in the past.
Yeah.
So he's appointed, but then he said he'll do it to help us, but then we need to see how we're going to create the position, whether he's going to get more money for it, or it's going to be full-time, not full-time, but fully duties under his job description as not officer. So it is an annual discussion about whether we need to create another position, but with the funding it is, we got by with Steve helping us and Steve doing it, so that's how we always left it. So if Steve feels that the regulations are such that he's not able to handle it anymore, then we need to either create a position or look to see if we need additional help to help him do that. And that's when I talked to him this week, and that's where he said, well, now, we've always worked it behind the scenes, but now's the time that we need to probably go to the board and discuss expanding the position. So, but Mike Cahill never called and filed any letters of complaint against the town. It was just the annual, either make him official or not official, is he doing it or not doing it? And Steve was always willing to do it, but we got by, and that's how we got by. And now if we need to have another person or increase his duties, then that's a discussion we'll have to do that.
It's going to have to be a budgetary issue as well.
So my question to you, Mr. Ward, is who's handling my situation now? Because as of today, Mike Cahill said that he has not gotten the requested information from Mr. Mudgett, that the rabies certificate supposedly from this lady from a veterinary hospital that got shut down 28 months ago because their vet wasn't licensed. and the quarantine order. He has only received a 10-day quarantine order when this animal should legally be under a 45-day quarantine order because it's got wounds of unknown origin.
All I can say is Mr. Mudgett has taken on the case and has indicated to me that he's spoken with Michael Cahill about this.
But Mr. Mudgett isn't returning any phone calls. I've called him every day, twice a day, since last Wednesday. I have yet to receive a phone call. He's got my 2 work numbers for me, VHS's phone number, my cell phone number. I haven't heard a word from him in regards to my situation. The cat...
That's the claim being made.
We need to bring Mr. Mudgett in.
We need to bring it in, but also remember that this board told him not to respond to cat calls too, because of the funding issue.
Response to bites, that's what.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think this woman obviously has an issue.
Absolutely.
I think we have to address it. So,
Absolutely.
I don't think we can be nonchalant about it.
No,
I
we
would
should
think
find
that-
out why he's not calling back.
Well, I would move that Mr. Ward get in touch with Mr. Budget
Immediately.
first thing tomorrow morning.
Yeah, call him
And
tonight.
I think it's imperative that this woman have a phone call returned to her.
Absolutely.
Either have her come in and a sit-down discussion. I think this is a serious issue, and I think it needs to be addressed.
And I think she said, if she got a phone call that said, I'm a dog officer.
I can call him right now.
I think you would have.
Well,
I mean, then I would have understood that, but I get no phone calls. And in a situation like this, well, if we don't have an animal inspector and we have only a dog officer, who deals with this? What if this animal in the next couple of days dies of rabies? I mean, this cat is out there. It's not, I mean, granted, he put it under a 10-day quarantine, but she's still letting the cat out. The cat tried to attack a neighbor's son the other day. Are we going to wait until somebody's child happens? I mean, I've got the Rabies Advisory Committee meeting from yesterday, which shows in our area that we've had a positive case of raccoon rabies, a positive cat rabies in this area, and a 57-year-old man hospitalized currently in a medically induced coma because it caught rabies, all within 30 miles of here. If this all happened within 30 miles of here, and rabies is in this area and it has to be addressed, and am I going to start...
Will the local Board of Health come into play with that?
I called, after speaking to the police who did not receive phone calls back from Mr. Mudgett, they told me to call Mr. Craig Martin, was very nice, who's the animal disposal officer. He told me to call the Board of Health, and I spoke to Mr. William Dickhout, which was very nice. Again, everybody's been very nice except for the person I need to speak to. And he told me to call you people. In the meantime, I also, was aware of my relationship with Mike Cahill and called him as well. Because, again, nobody really counseled me into what direction to go to with dealing with this cat. And
Now, when they quarantine an animal, who quarantines the animal? The owner? Or does it go to the vets?
It's up to the animal inspector, according to what I gave you. Most situations, it can be done in a person's house. If they're non-compliant, then it can be done in a veterinary hospital, registered dog pound or commercial kennel that is authorized by the state to be a quarantine facility. Like at VHS, we are an authorized quarantine facility from the state, so we could do a rabies quarantine. Personally, I try to avoid that at all costs. And all quarantine costs and associated costs with quarantine are supposed to be, in a private situation like this, at the cost of the owner. So maybe this is something where we could hold her responsible, or, for her lack of being responsible, and reimburse the town for the fees for salaries incurred in regards to this situation. Supposedly, the person who is in charge of this is an animal inspector. Like I said, Mr. Cahill led me to believe that in the absence of an animal inspector in a rabies situation like this, it would come over whoever is the animal control officer, dog officer, whatever. Now, Mike Cahill told me that he put the person on a 10-day quarantine. Now, of course, anybody can do whatever they want behind somebody's back, but the animal is still out there, and it's still trying to attack people. And
so who polices that? That's what I'm trying to get at.
It's supposed to be whoever puts it on quarantine, which would technically be the animal inspector if we had one. But right now, since we don't have one, she's not being supervised. It's still under improper quarantine because it should be under 45-day quarantine. Also, she was supposed to be told that she was to bring the animal to the vet, get a rabies booster, which, with my connections in the veterinary community, I've tried to find that out on my own. Nobody has record of this person on their databases, and most of them were able to search by street name. I called a dozen, no, I'm sorry, a little under a dozen, one under a dozen. And nobody was able to give me her name, which is Barbara Newell, on Clark Street, as an existing client that they've seen within the last several days. You know, like I said, we don't even, Mike Hale and I even wonder if the rabies vaccine that she supposedly got for this animal is even valid, if it was through Fitchburg Animal Hospital. Because like I said, they were shut down because their vet was not a licensed vet. It was just a certified veterinary technician. Certified vet techs, such as myself, can only give rabies vaccines under the direct supervision of a veterinarian, which means that they have to be in the same room while administration. So they were under investigation for 14 months and then shut down 28 months ago, which means that this is probably not even a valid rabies vaccine, which would then make the quarantine 6 months, or euthanasia. Knowing that this person cannot obviously keep this cat in, so as we've seen, and neighbors would be willing to come forth and attest to that, because they've seen the animal since the visit from Mike Cahill on Friday. I wouldn't consider her a place that should be doing a quarantine. It should be at a veterinary hospital or some sort of appropriate facility. But
We'll make sure you hear from somebody too, sweet. I apologize.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for hearing me.
You're welcome.
Could you leave a card?
Yes.
Do you have more than one?
I think.
Could you have one?
Thank you.
Michael, do you have one?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, any further business before we close?
Yes. In regard to the Rauscher Farm property, I would like to make a motion that we proceed with the closing. We start, we instruct the town solicitor to start on the closing. And, I would say come up with a timeline such that we close by approximately April 30th.
Pretty aggressive. That's pretty.
Shoot for it as a target, because along with that self-help grant, you have to close by June 1st, okay? So that gives you a month of...
Well, I'm just going to...
Well, that's a question.
It's close by, that's pretty...
Yeah,
pretty
that was the
aggressive.
question I was asking you before.
That's, even close a residential deal, straight is difficult to do. I'm just telling you, we'll do what we can, but I'm just telling you, that's a pretty aggressive closing for something of this magnitude.
Okay.
I don't think it's realistic, to tell you the truth.
Well, I'd say,
It's a shoot for...
it's a target,
It's a target date. It's a
I
goal
think we
date.
did the title search.
I hear you stuff, I'm just saying, everyone's gonna have realistic expectations.
Yeah.
That you can set that up as a target date, but I'm just telling you, it's gotta be realistic, and based upon that, in my opinion, is not realistic. But we can, that can be a target date, I just wanna make sure the board understands that that is a very, very aggressive plan.
Yeah.
And it's practically April 1st right now.
Yeah, in the private sector, that's an eon. That's a long time, so you gotta excuse my,
No, I think it's a goal, and at least it can generate all the points that have to be hit to achieve the closing.
the June 1st date.
Yeah.
What's the June 1st date again?
The date you have to close by to get the self-help grant. If you don't go for the self-help grant, then yes, you have longer. You have quite a bit longer, but
That's to get the self-help grant in this fiscal year, right?
yes. Close by June 1st, what was it? Reimbursal by June 30th, I believe, yeah.
Joe, I had a question since on that vein. Did you ever check into if we don't make the deadline this year, if we're able to apply for another self-help grant?
No, I don't believe we
Following
are. I believe you have to do it during the purchase process.
Well, if the purchase doesn't happen by June 1, our purchase will be August, September, July, we'll be in that fiscal year. So would we be eligible, I guess is my point, if we do miss this date? Should we apply for maybe 500,000 instead of the 350?
I don't believe we are. That's my belief. It could be
Maybe
looked
we should have Donnie go check.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm gonna talk to Donnie, so I'm gonna ask him that because obviously you don't get the grant money contemporaneous with the closing. You have to close first. The town has to fund the entire purchase price, then you get the grant money after that. So if we were to close this thing, say, on July 1st, which is still well within our requirements with Mr. Rauscher, I have a tough time believing that we couldn't file for the same grant in the new fiscal year. I don't know. I'm just saying it would surprise me.
I do believe in our conversations, though, back last year, that was talked about. And no, that was not an option. That's my memory.
Okay, I'll ask Donnie. I'm going to talk to Donnie Lowe tomorrow anyway on the grant itself. So
I'll second Joe's motion, because I think it's time to get moving and head to that, to the closing.
Is there any further
the ultimate
discussion?
goal, so.
Traffic date again for 30th.